Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. I'm Sheriff Scott Rose from Minnesota, and this is a special edition of the Officer Down Memorial Podcast.
Walking eastbound. Shots fired. Officer down. I repeat, officer down.
In today's episode, I had the pleasure of being on the Three Cops Talk podcast show, talking about my background, about struggles facing law enforcement, and about our fallen hero stories. It was really a fun show to be a part of. This is a show about cops, and it's told by cops. And they also take a hard look at a lot of law enforcement issues that are really important to everyone in this country today. So it was fun, great show, a lot of fun, a lot of laughs. Hope you guys enjoy.
It's time for a change. Strap your headphones on and join Chris, Scott, and Shaun.
3 active duty police officers in the Chicago suburbs.
As they face the tough subjects, including police brutality, racial tension, rioting, and more.
Weekly, you'll get tips and tricks on how to keep you and your family safe, what to do during traffic stops, how to handle domestic violence, and more.
This is a show about opening a dialogue, accepting that something has to be done, and bringing communities together again.
And now your hosts, Chris, Scott, and Shaun.
Hey folks, welcome to another episode of Three Cops Talk. This is one of your hosts, Shaun, and as usual, I'm here with Uncle Chris.
What's up, Captain?
And Big Sergeant Scott.
Hello, Shaun. Hello, Shaun. Hi, Shaun. He's even in South Carolina. It's still Shaun.
Shaun.
Yeah, everybody know that shit is stay Shaun.
You know, it's like
it'll change someday.
This is the great thing about America is that when you listen to English and there's so many different dialects and twangs and everything else to it, it's really kind of wild. But like now with all this mass migration going on in the country, it's like really weird. You come down here, pulled up to a guy the other day and he didn't realize that I could read his license plate, and I knew he was from New York, but he opened the window. So I told him, like, you ain't from around these parts, are you? And he's like, could you tell? I go, I looked at your license plate. I'm from Jersey. So it's like, oh, and then we were like,
did you walk up to the window? I walked up to
Long
the window.
Island. He's from Long
Island.
I asked the guy if you wanted some water. Are you looking for the water out of the window?
It's
you guys instantly bonded.
In
yeah.
Chicago.
Yeah, I put it in my bag. Hey, I need you to park the car over by there.
I'm glad we completely have gotten off the rails.
Right. I don't know. What are we doing here? What do we got going?
Serious. But this is what happens when guys get together. Cops get together. You know, we talk about this a lot. Like when police officers, they get together, we could obviously be comfortable with each other and talk about things that any cop from anywhere, maybe even the world, you can kind of start relating to, even if it's language barriers and things like that, because of the things that we see. But one of the things when we congregate, there's 2 times when we congregate. Generally, maybe when somebody's promoted, and comes into the profession. And then unfortunately, the other time we all always get together is when somebody's left the profession. And I'm not talking about retirement so much as I am obviously the loss of police officers. And we're seeing that a lot more across the country as of late. And it's always a very solemn thing. It's like we will cut up about anything like we started in this show. You have to have that kind of humor to survive this work. But when you talk about us coming together, you know, it's like the Super Friends. When something like that happens, you come to an officer's funeral and you see people from all over the place. I mean, the big 3 cities, you'll see them. They actually will send guys from Los Angeles to the Chicago area for funerals, or NYPD will send people out. And then you get these random agencies. You're like, where are you from? And they tell you they're from Maine or, you know, out in Oregon and stuff like that. And it's just something we feel very strongly about as a profession. It's sad that that's really the only time we truly ever get together, and other than conferences. And then, you know, conferences are usually 3 days and it takes cops about 48 hours to warm up to each other. And then all right, take off, man. It was great meeting you. See you, whatever. I'll never talk to you again. But, you know, it's just something that we feel pretty strongly about. And today's show is going to kind of concentrate on that a little bit. And we've got a guest that's going to be really good for us with that. But before we get into that, you guys got any thoughts on our inability to congregate effectively as a profession?
Well, I think the only time, the only time we really congregated was in somebody's hot tub, but we're not going to go into specific stories, but we congregated there quite a few times. But I mean, I just think it's
doing that because of COVID. COVID stopped that.
Right? Yeah.
Doesn't that hot water kill everything? That kills everything, right?
Hot tubs kill COVID.
Yeah,
I thought that's what it said on the side of the hot tub.
I mean, what's it for? All done. No COVID. No vaccination needed. Possibly injection. Anyway.
Your wife's use of chlorine. Your wife's like very liberal use of chlorine.
Right. Yeah.
But anyway,
I just think it's
joking because we really are sad.
Right. I just think it's because it's just our type of personality, and we just it just takes us long to warm up to somebody, and when you're done, you kind of want to be done, and you only want to see certain people, and I think for cops, if you talk to 2 or 3 cops, or maybe 4 or 5, and then outside the police profession, personally, I have 3 or 4 close friends that are outside the police profession, because I just keep a tight circle. I just think it's most of our personalities that, you think that, maybe people don't understand what you do, and you don't, and when you go there, everybody says, come and arrest me, or they just some stupid jokes, and you're just like, yeah, you just don't want to deal with it. So I think you just keep your circles tight.
Yeah. I mean, you go to training classes, and everybody, I think sometimes we do what we do with people just in general. We kind of size people up, like even cops from other departments. You're like, because you hear an agency that somebody's from, and you already have some kind of, idea or notion about,
right,
that agency or something like that, which, you don't like to stereotype like that, but it's out there. But funny story to that, when you're talking about like cops warming up to each other, as you may know, I like cars and all things associated with cars.
No.
Really?
No.
Yeah. So I had a situation the other day, where I was buying some car parts, and it was through like,
a junkyard on the west side. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
It was from one of these, sales sites, like OfferUp or something like that. So I go to pick it up, and I meet up with this guy, and as we're talking, I noticed that he's got the Blue Line, like the Blue Line rubber bracelet, like the same one that you got on, that same one that same thing. He's got one of those on, and he's got the standard police, like the rubber wedding ring. So we're just talking, and I said, "Oh, hey, are you a cop?" And he almost literally did like the little back up and look at me like. And you could tell that he was looking at me like, why are you asking me that? You know what I mean? But I know, I'm guessing because I see what you got on.
Right.
So I go, and I instantly realized like that he was giving me that eyeball, and I go, no, it's cool. I'm a cop too. And he's like, oh, all right. Then we were instantly friends. And then it was like 2 dogs walking up to each other in the park, and and then looking at each other, and it's like, all right, we're cool. And so and then
sniffing of butts.
I didn't want to say that part. I caught myself there before that part.
For car parts.
You're welcome.
And so then we proceeded to have like probably a 30-minute conversation talking about police work, and I'm getting blown up via the text, from the missus, like, what are you doing? Why are you still there? And I'm like, hey, it turns out this guy's a cop. And she's like, oh my God, you're going to be there all day, and I'm like, okay, all right. We'll wrap up.
We're talking about ferrous metals from catalytic converters and pop stuff.
We're talking about,
he's never coming
We're
off
talking about police work and cars. I'm probably going to wind up sitting in a lawn chair on this guy's driveway for probably half the afternoon. So you're going to have to.
His junkyard dog had puppies, and he named the first puppy Sergeant Scott. Right? Is that what he did? So anyway.
Oh my God! So anyway, that's my story related to that. So it's pretty funny.
All right. Well, now that we got all this stupidity out of the way, we can probably get into some more somber stuff. Well, our guest today is Sheriff Scott Rose, who's got 20 plus years of law enforcement experience in Minnesota. He's worked in a myriad of jobs up in the state of 1,000 lakes, I guess. 10,000. Okay, I shorted him.
1,000.
He was
actually,
history,
with all the cops quitting, I thought they'd take some lakes with them.
That's true. That's the sad truth.
As you can tell, the good sheriff's got some sweet pipes. I mean, when you listen to this guy, I'd be like, God, I wish this guy was my sheriff. I'd do whatever he said. Whatever he said, I would do.
Right.
And come on, like the traffic and weather every 7 minutes over the main channel. He's going to get us he has a background in broadcasting, which is kind of unique. We like to have folk that have come on the show that not only have law enforcement experience, but have some other practical experience in it. We talk about communication and how important it is in our world and things that we have. And Sheriff Rose is totally that, when you think about it. He's got a few different things that he does. Obviously, he does the Officer Down Memorial podcast, which is one of the reasons we got him in the show. It's some great content. If you like to listen about stories, particularly harrowing stories and stories of heroism and things like that, his podcast is a great listen because it's straight out of the officers' mouths, radio broadcasts, things along those lines. And he memorializes officers through their friends, families, organizations, calls that he, can receive audio from. And it's a great listen. So you should go over there again and listen to that Officer Down Memorial podcast. He's the host of that, and he's been doing that. He's going to tell us for quite some time. But he's got the same machine that Chris has with the sound effects.
Yeah, but his is a little bit more like, you can tell he's got some kind of background.
The Roadcaster. He even said Roadcaster better than the Roadcaster.
It sounds like the Roadcaster commercial.
Right.
It sounds like Roadhouse, but it's Roadcaster.
You're like, yeah, I could go to that bar. You're like, no, it's not.
Yeah, right. But if you guys listening to us, please give it up for Sheriff Rose. We really appreciate the time, and he's coming on here. He's going to talk about some really great, serious stuff for us. We'd like to get into his career a little bit, what brought him to doing this, just like, we've told people why we decided to do podcasting. And like I said, sir, I can't thank you enough for coming on the show and kind of covering a very serious topic that a lot of other people, I think, would be interested in hearing.
Yeah, thanks for coming.
Thanks for coming.
Yeah, thanks for coming, and
thanks for having me.
Thank you for your mission.
So if we could start out, tell us a little bit about your background in law enforcement, and then like how you went from the broadcasting path into
how you sang up backup singer for Elvis to
the most inept world for communication whatsoever as law enforcement.
So my wife married a DJ with long hair, dark glasses, beard, earring, the whole 9 yards, rock DJ, and then 30 years later, she's married to the sheriff. little odd.
It's the same guy, though.
It's the same guy. Oh, I'm sitting in the front seat now, not in the back.
She's like, this isn't what I ordered.
Right, there you go.
Yeah. No, I as a kid, I was always involved in music and played in different bands, and I still play in a couple bands today. But after school, I didn't know what I wanted to do. My dad was a cop. My dad was a cop and a teacher, and I wasn't sure what I wanted to do. And of course, I was the typical cops kid and teacher's kid. I was always in trouble in school and I didn't pay a whole hell of a lot of attention to anything there. And after school, he's like, well, what are you going to do? And when I told him that I thought that I think I'm going to go into radio because I like music. I'm going to go into radio. He said, son, I think that's the perfect choice for you. Well, I'm thinking it's because of my voice or my quick wit or. And I said, no, what, Dad? Why do you say that? Son, you have the perfect face for radio. Thanks, Dad. I thought it was going to be something cool.
Right. Now you took a podcast.
Yeah, I know, right. Hey, so I went to radio. I grew up in Southeast Minnesota. I grew up in the county that I work in now. And after high school, I went down to Phoenix and went to a broadcasting school in downtown Phoenix. I worked at the Mayo Clinic part-time and I went to school full-time down there for radio and ended up specializing in audio production. That's always kind of been my forte. And I went from Phoenix to Nebraska to Kansas, back to Nebraska. And then I ended up coming back to a rock station here in Rochester, which is just about 15 minutes east of me. But all these radio stations that I worked at, it was always production. I was a production director. And I did on-air stuff too. And I also enjoyed that. But my love was always being in the studio, being in the production studio.
Yeah.
And then I ended up getting out of radio while I was here. And long story short, I ended up volunteering on what they call it back then. They call it the sheriff's. Well, they still do call it the sheriff's posse. It used to be a mounted posse. So it's a volunteer, like a reserve group. And we helped with security at events and parades and festivals and whatever. And that's how I got started. In 96, I started on the posse. My dad suggested it because I had horses. My wife and I have had horses for years. And he said, if you want to do something with that, why don't you try the posse? He was still one of the deputies there. And I tried it. And one of the things that you had to do while you were on the posse, one of the requirements was you had to do one ride along a month with patrol. So I did ride-alongs, probably 2 or 3 ride-alongs. And I was like, okay, I love doing this.
This is cool.
And it was cool. And it was my home area. So I knew the places, I knew the people. I could pick out the good people, the not so good people. I had one of the deputies that I rode along with. He also had a music background. He actually played professionally for a while before he was a cop. Huh. And so we hit it off. And one thing led to another. And in Minnesota, you have to have a college degree to be a cop. You can't get licensed without a degree. So
the whole state.
I ended up,
Yeah. Okay.
I ended up in I was 31 when I went back to college. And I got my, you can do a 2-year or 4-year degree. Big agencies, bigger metro agencies, they want to see that 4-year degree. But you, to get post licensed, you just need a 2-year degree here. So I got my 2-year degree and ended up getting hired by the same agency my dad had just retired from. And
that's cool.
And I've been here ever since.
Did you get his badge or anything like that? Like
his locker or anything? No. But I've got some cool stuff from him. We lost him in 2008 to diabetes, and
I hear that.
But he was no, thank you. He was one. Fortunately for me, he was one of those cops that everybody loved. He was a teacher that everybody loved and a cop that everybody loved. So it made my getting into this a little bit easier. Although it was somewhat uncomfortable for when I first got hired back in 2001, 2002. I was working with a lot of deputies that chased me around as a kid, that had me in the backseat as a kid. so
I know a guy named Scott that had that same issue.
This is not the same guy. So when I told my dad, I was going to go from radio to being a cop. My dad was less enthusiastic. He was like, "Oh, really?
Is that what you would do?"
Yeah, right, bro. What? I said, I know. He says, well, you're the kid. I have 3 younger brothers. He said, you're the kid who spent most of the time in the backseat.
Right.
I said, well, to be honest, Dad, I've come full circle. I'm sitting in the front now. They even let me drive sometimes.
Yeah.
And
it's weird. We used your booking photo for your department ID.
Yeah, right.
Hey, I know you.
So a lot of the deputies that I started there with, they remembered me from being a kid, and they're like, "Oh Jesus, why are we hiring this kid?" And fortunately for me, the sheriff,
a great welcoming,
loved him to death. Yeah.
Hi, 112-1417. What?
Yeah.
That's funny.
What?
Oh crap! Yeah. So.
Hey, but that's great.
Yeah,
awesome. They worked with him. So,
but do you think that background, that diverse background, how did it help you being an officer? Like a lot of times, like you can relate to a whole lot more people from behind the badge with that amount of experience, or like, hey, I know what it's like. When you hang around, everybody knows like musicians, they smoke weed and stuff like that. And it's just like you can kind of put things into perspective a little bit more. It's not like it's so foreign to you. It's like, I'm arresting people that are literally from another planet. Like you can say like,
you can kind of relate to it more.
Yeah. Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Right.
I did. For me, it was, I was comfortable. I was comfortable. It was in the area that I grew up in. So, a lot of people that I knew, a lot of second generation families that I knew. And, with my communications background, I got to where I was pretty good at communicating, pretty good at talking through things. And I think that really helped along the way. Plus, like I said, it helped that my dad was well loved in the community and very well known. So it was a good transition for me and love the job. I absolutely love it. I try and pull road shifts when I can to help, especially night shifts. I miss night shifts.
Right.
So I'll go out at night. I'll put on my brown uniform, my regular deputy collar brass, and I'm out there working for the sergeant, and he or she can tell me what they need me to do, and I'll go.
That's great, though. That's good awesome. Leadership.
That's good leadership.
I love
That's good leadership.
Obviously, the sheriff's an elected position. Right?
Yeah. It's one thing that's different here in Minnesota too. It's nonpartisan, so we don't have to run on a party platform. So I don't have a party to answer to.
Yeah, right. There you go. So it's just that the people elect you based upon your record and your reputation, like you said, your father and your background and things like that. And it's like, what's the demographic of the county that?
So we're a small county. We're 440 square miles. We're a bedroom community for the most part. Most of our population is a bedroom community of Rochester, which is the 3rd largest city in the state.
Right.
Rochester's 125,000 or something like that there. But we're small. We're 21,000 in our county. Every kind of income level you can think of, on the Rochester side, because it's all Mayo Clinic and IBM employees, mostly Mayo Clinic. Mayo Clinic employs 36,000 employees.
Wow.
So it's upper middle income on the east side of the county, and then it's more rural and farm and blue collar to the north, south, and west.
Over the last few years, Sheriff, obviously, like we all felt the impact of what happened in Minneapolis with, the Chauvin situation. How was it there being that close to it in Minnesota? Like, I mean, I didn't even know that we were going to get into this topic with you, but obviously, fine. When it's if you can just keep talking, that'd be really super cool because it's like a great voice for radio. Like, tell me a bedtime story, but it's in a serious, I imagine like being that close to it. I mean, Chicago had its problems, but everybody did, like even small towns. But I can't imagine being that close in the state of Minnesota for a lot of the things that were going on there. What was that like?
So most of us in Southeast Minnesota in our district, we sent deputies to help.
Okay.
In Minnesota, statewide, we've got somewhere around 9,000, between 9 and 10,000 cops. And, it was all hands on deck up there. They needed all the help they could get. And frustrating for us, the way the media handled it, certainly the way the national media handled it. Fortunately for me in my county, in our small area, we're a very conservative county. Every House representative and state representative from our county, they're all Republican. They're all super law enforcement supportive. So in our main area, we had no protests. We didn't have it. We didn't see anything like that. The worse it got in Minneapolis, the more food would be brought in and the more gift certificates would be brought in. And our guys, everybody's paying for our guys' meals and just everybody saying thank you. But the worry certainly was all of our guys helping up there.
Right.
The guys that are going up there to help, or some of the bigger agencies around us, Rochester and Olmsted County to the east of us, they have a much bigger agency, so they'd send people up and we'd go help there.
Right.
Just to kind of back their guys up there. So we backed up our neighboring counties and it's stressful. I talk a lot about PTSD and stress with the podcast.
Right.
Because as you guys know, the job is stressful enough the way it is with
absolutely
with all the crap that we have to deal with. And then, and then to put this kind of stress on top of it. It's tough. It's still tough for our staff. And, we're not done we still got the Brooklyn Center thing to get through. And, things have calmed down. So I don't know. We'll see where it goes.
Yeah. And there's an executive of an organization, the guy at the top, you're sending people off and you're not just worried about, like the traditional worry was, are they going to be physically harmed? Are they going to be, unfortunately killed or something like that? Now you got to worry about, is the officer up there doing what he thought was right in a circumstance, and based upon the fact that he's in that area, he could be indicted for something. And now I'm losing that. How is that impacting my agency? And then there's a general reluctance amongst your officers to say, well, I want to step up and help, because cops would. I mean, the hurricane that's coming through Louisiana right now, I remember last time it was with Katrina, everybody was jumping on a chance to go down there and deal with that, and help from across the country. And now you might see people going, I don't know, man, who's in charge down there? Right. If I go down there and I have to do something, or up there for you guys in that case, why would I want to do that? And as an executive, everybody wants to help, but in the same sense, you got to go, I got to protect these people.
Right.
In Minnesota, we have 87 sheriffs. We have a really strong Minnesota Sheriff's Association. Our motto is no sheriff stands alone. Huh. And it's very true. And Hennepin County, where Minneapolis is, the Hutch is the sheriff up there, and he's just an incredible guy. And it's obvious it's the biggest county in the state with the biggest budget in the state. And he's one of those guys that they give their personal cell phone to every sheriff, and all we need to do is make a phone call and they'll have an army coming down to help us. Nice. And it doesn't matter where in the state. This is the first time that I ever remember that it's Hennepin County calling us saying we need help.
Right. We need help.
Right.
Yeah.
We're not used to that.
Right. Yeah.
And all the sheriffs were saying, okay, we'll help, but our guys aren't coming to work for Minneapolis PD.
Right.
We need to be under your
guidance. Yeah.
Right. Because we're not going to we're not going to put them in the same. Why would we put them in the same situation as those guys are in?
Right.
Just not going to do it. And Hutch said he had everybody come and work under him, and we did what we needed to do. And
is that pretty easy to do up there as far as like interagency agreements and things like that? If you need to send them to do that,
yeah. It's especially with the sheriff's offices. With the PDs, it's different because you got too many chiefs. It's not just the police chief; it's the mayor, it's the city administrator, and with the sheriffs here, we're independent elected. We don't answer to anybody. So
that's great.
That's awesome.
Streamlines that process a little bit. Yeah.
Yep.
That's something to think about for people listening to the show. Like, hey, I'm making a decision about coming into the career. What would be the best organization to work for? That's something that, a lot of us wish we knew before we started, like working for a sheriff. Your sheriff directly works for the people.
Right.
If you're a chief, you're appointed and you're working for elected officials, and you could be the best chief in the world. But if you're working for an elected official that is, being
Doesn't
guided
like
by
you.
certain
Right.
factors that,
And there's some chiefs that work for themselves.
Right.
And historically, you look at Minneapolis, you look at Seattle, you look at Portland, you look at Chicago. Those are all the areas that we're hearing all these issues with law enforcement are areas that are appointed chiefs.
Right.
So they're appointed by the mayor, the city council, the city administrator. In Minneapolis, the mayor had full control of the police department during this incident with Shaun. They're trying to change that now. I think that votes this week. They're just wanting to they're still wanting to get rid of the police department altogether and start all brand new. I don't know how they're going to get anybody to work there.
No.
How do you make that? I mean, hey, look, everybody should kind of look at the idea of like, hey, there's a chance to maybe reform some things, but to completely scrap something and try to start it over from scratch, hey, you won't feel the effects of that for years, decades, until you know whether this worked or not, and what will we lose or gain in the process. I don't know. I mean, I think we're baby with the bathwater up there is what's going on in Minnesota. And like with the rest of the world, like Minnesota, like people were like, what, how did this happen in Minnesota? You know what I mean? Like it was so foreign to us, but then all the news that you read about coming out of there is any periodical you read, it's like, it's like off the rails. No, it's not like everyone's just reacting to the loudest screamers and there's no sense. So, well, that all being said, it obviously,
but it doesn't run its reverse. And we saw that with Officer French. It doesn't happen the other way around, and that's the unfortunate part about it, that she gives up the ultimate sacrifice. And then you have these elected officials going, we're not going to do anything. We're not going to do nothing, and again, I'm not justifying what happened in Minnesota. I'm just, I've talked about this a million times before, just an even playing field,
Right.
That's all.
It's frustrating when you have leadership, whether it's at the city level or the state level, whether it's in the governor's office or in the House or the Senate, and they're armchair quarterbacking these cases well before there's any data out, well before we would ever release
the evidence is even correct.
Before there's any evidence out there, and they're condemning the officer, or they make some crass statement about, we have another black male that was shot by an officer and we have to deal with that. And we want you to be patient with us. And well, you just convicted the guy. Just by your word. And we dealt with that all the time here. It's terrible. And it's the same way in Chicago with Mayor Lightfoot and all those issues there. It's terrible.
And unfortunately, it's creating a situation where more and more officers, like when you deal with the public and certain members of the public, they automatically just are being fed things that make us seem to be, like I've said before, like we're goblins to people. You know what I mean? Like we're just, we come there and it doesn't, the things that they're accusing us of, they're doing to us. And like we've said before on this show, some of it's earned, some of it's issues, some of it's things, bad training and things like that. But by and large, your podcast is probably getting more business than normal. I mean, the murder rates for police officers for this year alone is already exceeded what we've seen in the last few years. Every day you wake up and you see something new. Obviously, the most recent one that was like of a national attention that we got because of the big city of Chicago was Ella French, and you still see that out there in the news. But I think it's lost on people what goes into all of this. Like they see the funeral, they see what happened, they're sad by it, and then they just move on. And I think in listening to some of your show, is it really great? Like, I don't care how many years you've been doing this. When you listen to those kind of calls, I mean, like the hair on your neck stands up when you're listening to it. And it doesn't matter what it is, whether you know how it's going to turn out or not, whether you've seen the videos on YouTube and Facebook and all this other stuff, when you hear that radio traffic and the things that are going on, like throughout, you're like, oh, wow, this is just, it wakes things up in you as a cop. But also civilians could gain a lot by listening to that and hearing what was going on prior to the incident. So again, very rarely that comes out. Can you talk a little bit about how you got involved with that and why you decided, particularly as a sheriff, to kind of start pushing this stuff out to people? It's for lack of a better term, it's entertaining to listen to. The subject matter is a little, at times, very
difficult.
Solemn, but in listening to it, the entertainment value of it is like, if you are into police things, it is a great listen.
Right. Thank you. So I got involved in 2013 we lost a captain here to a heart attack. He was 43 years old. His name was Loring Gunther. He was a mentor to all of us. He had been there 20 years, had pretty much everybody on staff. He had trained them at one point or another. And one of my best friends at work and died at 43. And he had just got home from work. It ended up being deemed a work-related death due to an acute. I was actually the investigator assigned to the case, and he died of and he had an acute enlarged heart. The coroner told me it was due to acute daily stress, and that daily stress in our particular case didn't necessarily have to do with cases, although he had obviously worked some bad cases, but it was a bad administration. It was an administration that he always felt that he had to protect his guys. It was an administration that felt that they believed in a disciplinary based model versus
communication.
Exactly. There was no communication back then. So and they'd go after anybody that disagreed with him. You just couldn't do that. And he spent his whole time trying to protect everybody from it, in addition to doing his job and being the number 3 guy in the agency and going on calls. And at some point he stopped talking about it and didn't want to talk about work. And he was actually the one that was going to run for sheriff in 2014, about 3-4 months later, and died of a heart attack. And I ended up being the one to run. Mike Leanhart was the chief deputy at the time. He had no interest in being sheriff. He ended up getting fired by the same administration a month and a half later. So it tore our agency apart.
Oh yeah.
And I had when Loring died that night, a bunch of us were there because we all lived pretty close, and they're working on him and being there with his wife and canceling the helicopter. The helicopter landed, but we couldn't save him. And my first phone call, we actually had the sheriff walked off the property. The wife said, "He's why Loring's gone. I want him gone."
Wow.
So we had one of the patrol sergeants walk him off the property, and I called. It was interesting.
Yeah, that's a scene. I bet.
I called Sheriff Kevin Torgerson, who's the sheriff in Olmsted County. He's one of the original members of the Minnesota Law Enforcement Memorial Association on the Honor Guard. He's been with it since it started, and I called him. I said, "Kevin, I'm at Loring's house. He's gone. I don't know what to do." And Lima he said, "We got it covered. We got you covered. We'll take care of it. We'll help you. We'll help work you through every step." And from that day on, Lima came and took care of everything and really put together an incredible celebration of Loring's life to an agency that was really hurting.
Right.
It wasn't just, he wasn't shot at a call. He wasn't, it was deemed a line of duty death by the state of Minnesota based on our circumstances. And Lima came and just really did just an amazing ceremony for him.
That's great to hear.
That's what got my interest in Lima.
Yeah.
So it was after that I ran to on the board, and I've been on the board with them ever since. And working with survivor families, I'm also on the board with the Law Enforcement Memorial Foundation of Southeast Minnesota. And I had the chance to meet a lot of survivor families. We have 4 fallen officers from our county, including Loring, that date all the way back to 1905. Loring was one of my best friends. The next one is Doug Clausen from 1999. I grew up with his kids. I grew up in his house. The one before that was Chief Greg Lang from Claremont in 1988. And my dad and Greg were good friends. And my dad is actually on that podcast. So I got there's
you've got ties to everybody in this.
I got ties to it.
Absolutely.
So for me, and with my personality, I want to do everything I can to help, and I want to see, what can we do to help these survivor families. So in COVID last year, I've had this studio in here for since 2005 or 2006 or something like that, and so I've been doing voiceover work on the side forever, and but everything slowed down during COVID, and so I'm looking at what I'm doing at work, and I'm looking at the law enforcement memorial stuff, and I'm like, there's got to be a better way to share these stories, having known a lot of these officers, these fallen officers and their families, and having worked with them. I just know there's so much more to the story than the little paragraph you read on the state memorial site,
right?
Or on ODMP or on the national site. And I get why it's an abbreviated, just a basic explanation of what happened to the officer, but there's so much more to tell. And
so many more people out there across the country that are going through the same thing too.
Absolutely. So why not? So when I talk to a few people that I have that are friends that are still in radio or they're in podcasting, and I mentioned the idea, they're like, one, there isn't anything like it out there. But two, why in the world would you want to do it now when there's so much anti-police rhetoric?
Yeah.
Right.
Going on nationwide, especially with since Ferguson, essentially.
Right. Yeah. Right.
And I said, I'd have to argue with you. I think this is the best time to do it.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Because this podcast
is
just another vehicle to show people that we're just normal people.
Yeah.
Right.
Ordinary people willing to take extraordinary risks.
Right.
Just for our community.
Right.
And we don't do it for the money.
Definitely not. No.
Right. And I think,
so then
I think one of the other things, like you just said, with the big thing is like that we are human and we are, just regular people, doing stuff that people won't to protect people. And that's why I said earlier, there's the even playing field, like, the officer, Chauvin. I mean, he did what he did and he got penalty and he got punished for it just like a bad guy.
Right.
And that but with the bad guys, it happens on a daily basis that we see. And there's nothing, and it's I don't want to say that it's worse, but it's it happens all the time. And for me, it's like, where is the outcry of that? Like on a daily basis, you have children dying, you have all this, which is far more of a problematic situation than, the number of bad cops. And just to reiterate, there are bad cops and that they should get punished. And I agree with all that. But a major problem is people killing each other on a daily basis. And that doesn't get the national news. And that's what just to show that we're human and let's just get an even playing field.
Right. And nobody hates a bad cop more than a good cop.
100%. 100%.
We tell that to everybody here with everything that happened with Chauvin up in Minneapolis. We're like, nobody agreed with that.
Right. Not at all. No, nationally.
Nationally, through the riots and stuff that we were having and then all this stuff, I wasn't with one cop that goes, yeah, he was right. Nobody.
No, not at all.
None.
Not at all.
And that's what you're getting bricks thrown at you. You're saying that.
You're all suffering for his bad actions.
Right.
Right.
And the other frustrating thing for us too is it drives me crazy when I hear people talk about systemic racism in law enforcement or systemic use of force issues in law enforcement.
Right.
When you look at the data,
right,
there's no data to support that.
Right.
None. Mm-hmm. You look at Chauvin. They say, okay, well, he had 15 or 18 use of force complaints with him, and they were all from people of color. Well, he works in North Minneapolis.
Right.
And that's where he's worked his entire career. He's worked in Minneapolis.
Right.
So the majority of the people that he deals with are people of color in high crime areas.
Yeah.
So it's natural that not excusing him, because we've had media ask us about use of force complaints in our office. Mm-hmm. I have 34 officers here, or 34 deputies. I don't have one use of force complaint documented on anybody.
Mm-hmm. Right.
We don't have them.
Right.
For him to have 18, that's, or 15 or 18 or whatever it was. But for you to say that it's because of color,
right?
It doesn't have anything to do with color.
Right.
Right. So it's just that part's really frustrating for us, and especially from rural Minnesota, because we're not very diverse here.
Mm-hmm.
And we're probably more offended by that than anybody.
Right.
And I don't know, it's just it's a frustrating deal. So,
and like I said, and I agree with you, and that's why when I came up, when I talked to these guys about this idea, it was during this whole thing, and again, just like you, this is the best time to do it, because we do have to get the word out there. We do have to, hit this mission hard. We have to bridge this gap, and by doing that, we have to tell people what the truth is. We have to show them that we're human just like they are, and we understand that they are human with feelings and emotions. That's why we do what we do.
Yep. And these guys they're the same people you sit by in church. They're the same people you sit across the room from at the restaurant, or your kids are playing ball together, or we're part of the community. We're ordinary people that are willing to take extraordinary risks to help keep our communities and our families safe.
Right.
And without any interest in being rewarded for it. It's just a calling. It's what they want to do. They want to, they believe they want to be a part of something bigger than themselves, or they're, it just frustrates me to no end.
Yeah, I get it. And then
there's definitely no other job like it. I'm going to tell you
that's for sure.
I think that, like, when you travel the world, I was in the military, you go, and like I've said before, like when you're over there and you're dealing with those things, like these people don't understand freedom. They've never had it. That's why we're there as the military. But when you're in the United States, these people have been the freest people in the history of mankind, particularly in this day and age. Right. And, you can make arguments that government overreach is becoming the reality of our day. But the bottom line is that you're dealing with pros when you're an American cop. These people understand what their rights and freedoms are. And they know, even though there are some bad cops and bad experiences that the media constantly will perpetually let us know about, because that's what sells and that's what works in their world, is that, despite that, by and large, you could trust a police officer and you really know what his limits are.
Right.
Go to other places in the world and like have them define what a police officer is to you. These people, I mean, you'll get such wild descriptions, particularly in the non-Western world, where we've done a lot of our work as of late. And I think right now, like you said, that it's best to strike while the iron's hot and to get in these two shows hopefully will be forged in more of a fire. You know what I mean? Like as opposed to anybody can captain a ship when the seas are calm. You know what I mean? We're definitely getting in there. It's like, I mean, I hope this sells. I mean, because at any time, any one of us can be just shut down and silenced.
Absolutely.
For just speaking what we think is the truth.
Right. No, absolutely. We, I think we just need to be, we've been the silent majority for too long.
Right. Absolutely.
And we tell that to our community. And if you look at our social media with my agency, we promote. We're always sharing stories about our officers. We're always sharing the success stories. We're going to own up to it when we make mistakes, but we're human. And that's part of this project, just to show people that these are regular people with regular families, and they're just willing to take on, certainly a challenging calling, especially nowadays, for us. For people, in most cases, for people they don't even know.
Right, absolutely, and it's fascinating. I mean, our society is fascinated with police officers, but as every show we've had, generally have, but they really don't know what we do.
No. They don't.
I mean, like, despite all of the movies, television, everything like that, people really don't know what we do. So could you talk a little bit, sir, about the content of your show, like how you put it together, what you do, how it sounds?
So with the podcast, what I'll do is I'll take a look at a story. I'll do a public data request in Minnesota. I guess other states are different. Certainly other countries are different as to what available data there is for an officer shooting, for example. I talked to a podcast in the UK last week, and he was fascinated by the podcast because he said, you can't get radio traffic. You can't get telephone traffic over there. None of that's public. So he said, to hear that on your podcast, he said to him, that was super interesting because it puts you there.
Right.
It makes it real. And, so what I'll do is I'll look at the officer's bio and their story on whether it's on a law enforcement memorial site or the national site or ODMP, and I'll reach out to. One of the things I want to do with these is I want to make sure that the family is okay with this.
Right.
That the family is to a point where they want to tell the story. And 99% of the time, what I find is these survivor families, all they want to do is tell the story.
Right.
They'll tell me that. When my husband or father or my brother or my, whoever it was, when my officer was killed, it was all the media attention. It was all the law enforcement officers coming over and other officers' families coming over, food being brought over, and the planning of the funeral and the celebration and everything that entails that. And then afterwards, for 2 or 3 weeks, or maybe a little bit longer, you got everybody still coming over, everybody's still checking on you to make sure you're okay. And then it starts to slow down and it stops.
Yeah.
And then it gets awkward.
Right.
This really happened.
It's natural. It's natural for us to, at some point in a crisis like this, it's natural for us at some point to go, God, I should call her, but I don't want to bring up something that's going to bring back bad memories, or I don't want to get her, I don't want to upset her or him or, whoever it is. And, all they want is that phone call.
Right.
All they want is somebody to talk about their fallen officer, because that's their biggest fear, is that he or she's going to get forgotten.
Right.
And the service is going to be forgotten. Right. So the one wife told me, she said the silence after a few weeks after the funeral, she said the silence re-victimized me every day. I just wanted somebody to talk about it.
Yeah.
And and they've never had the full story told. And for most of these families, they've never heard the full story, because at the time where that data was available is in most cases during the trial. And that's the time where they've completely shut down.
Right.
Right.
So every family I've worked with has learned something from about their loved one and about the case that they never knew before, which has been kind of interesting. I had one wife that said she was in tears. She said, I had no idea they did everything they could to help him like that.
Yeah.
Didn't know. Didn't know at the time. She's not going to read any reports. She doesn't want to hear. She don't want to hear about it at the time. The grandkids or kids or grandkids, especially grandkids, those are super rewarding calls for me, because I'll have them call and say, and this is a typical word for these families. It's taboo talking about dad, or it was taboo talking about grandpa. You just didn't talk about what happened.
Right.
So we just didn't do it.
Yeah.
And grandkids telling me that, I never knew the story, because they never, and when I'd asked, it's just not something you talk about. Now that we know the whole story, he says, now we're sharing it with everybody, because grandpa was a hero.
Right.
And we want
people to hear this story.
Yeah.
It's
exactly
right.
Yeah.
That's great. Sir, that is like, that was a revelation. Cool. I had not ever.
So cool. Or some of these older officers that have been on these stories, who have reconnected with the officers who were at the scene. They're getting back together for coffee again, or a beer, or whatever. Or the one of them, from Itasca County, Robert Lawson story. They were talking about family members who were even kind of estranged from the fallen officer's family, just because it was awkward.
Yeah.
And now come back because now they know the whole story. Of course, the rumor mill. You got the rumor mill, which is terrible anytime, especially with cop stories. And when the facts aren't out there, you just don't know.
It's filled with negativity
and falsehoods. And
so what I'll do is I'll talk to the families, and then while I'm doing that, I'm also doing a public data request to the agency and to the state and to the Department of Corrections if the suspect is still alive. And I'll pull every report, every narrative report, every photo, every any audio, any radio traffic, any telephone calls, 911 calls related, and then the records from the Department of Corrections on the suspect and where he or she's at. The story is about the officer. It's not the suspect, but people want to know what happened to him.
Yeah. Right.
I don't want to leave that. I don't want to leave that open-ended in the story. And then what I do is I start researching the era. In the beginning of these stories, I'll give you little sound bites from that era to kind of give you an idea to set the tone as to what time or what era we're in.
Right.
And then I'll introduce you to the community and give you kind of a flavor of what the community's like and what makes it buzz. And then I'll introduce you to the family and the officer, to where you feel like you kind of have a relationship that, you know what, it's 1977. And I know I'm comfortable with, I know the agency. I kind of get an idea of the chemistry there, the officer and his family. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to walk you through exactly what happened to that officer when we lost him. And I'm going to recreate that incident.
Wow.
And it's raw.
Yeah.
Yeah, I imagine.
I bet.
It's raw and it's real. And with the help of the family who were left behind and help of officers who were there, radio and telephone traffic when that's available. You just paint the whole story. And essentially I put you through you losing this officer, but knowing him as a person,
right?
Not just as a cop.
Yeah.
Right.
You know, and they're powerful stories. And when I first started doing it, my intentions initially were, we have 34 fallen officers in southeast Minnesota. 4 of them are from my county. And I thought, well, I want to do the 34, just to honor them and to be able to tell their story.
Sure.
And it's kind of, it's expanded from there to, I've helped on 3 different parole hearings, doing the podcasts for the fallen officers, highlighting the suspect and allowing those agencies to use that podcast to educate their community, to encourage them to send letters to the Department of Corrections saying he needs to stay in jail.
Yeah.
Right.
And we're at 100% so far. The last one we helped with was a Winona County deputy who was killed, John Schneider. And they said that, my understanding was that was the most response they've had from the public on any parole hearing case, which is pretty cool.
Yeah. It's great to get that kind of support.
It is.
So then I have one that I'm working on right now, which kind of, so I went from the just southeast Minnesota to, okay, now I'm kind of all over the state and I'm doing some different things. And then then I did a survivor story where I thought there were some suggestions on, it'd be cool to have a survivor story to be able to have at least once where we hear the officer. And you get that officer side of the story. Yeah. And I just did that one with Dustin Reichert, and that's a cool story. And then now I'm working on a officer down. This one's is a tough one to work through. It's an officer down by suicide.
Oh, jeez.
And it's an officer that I knew personally. And I grew up with his wife, and it was 2019, so it's not that long ago.
Right.
And he was a sergeant up in the Metro, and it's a tough story, but for me with that one, and his wife feels the same way, is that cops are under more stress now than they've ever been before.
Oh yeah. Scrutiny is crazy.
Yeah, absolutely.
We talked earlier about performing and being a performer. And I tell that to people coming in the job all the time now. You are going to be on TV more than people that work in the movie industry. I mean, you're going to be on video and on microphone. And if you are not comfortable with being that way in front of people, everything we're doing is a performance. It's a performance for court. It's a performance for everything. And like you said, the scrutiny is unreal. I mean, if any other profession had it, like if we imagine putting the cameras on teachers and doing this, people would be like, I'm not doing that. And we'd never do it. Doctors, all these people that are in these high profile jobs,
get sued.
They'd never do it.
Right. Over 225 or 250 malpractice deaths a year with doctors. You don't see that.
200,000.
250,000. But the podcast is cool because it allows that survivor family to learn the whole story, and to be able to share that story and have something that they can share with generations. And it's absolutely factual. Everything's done by the reports. Some of the older officers, I love talking with the older cops because they'll sit and talk to me for 2 hours on how things are done, and I'll have their report in front of me.
60 minutes,
30 years ago.
60 minutes.
Right. I'll have their report in front of me, and ask them questions, and when they remember things a little bit differently, I'll say, hey, well, this is what you put in your report, and they're like, oh yeah, you're right. That's what it was, and just making sure it's 100% accurate and real and raw, and just to show that these guys are heroes. And
Sheriff, I'm curious, have you ever had any families from doing this, families that of officers, even if they're not from the same area or anything like that have connected through their experiences that they've had and become, friends or connected that way?
Yeah. It's so the survivor families are nationwide. We're very, very good at burying our dead cops. We're very good at celebrating their service and burying them. Historically, we've not been very good at continuing to support their survivor families.
Right.
We've just not been good at it.
Right.
And they need the support, certainly after the fact, more than ever. Because it's not only are they losing their officer, but to them, they feel like they're losing a family.
And we all know that risk that we run out there doing this job. We know the risk that we do every day doing this job, and we don't prepare well enough, maybe sometimes, for the reality of, oh my gosh, what happens to the people that are left behind?
Right.
Something terrible happens. What happens to the people that are left behind?
We say all the time in training to guys, death is only easy for the dead.
Right.
Think about
Exactly.
it. I mean, it's so hard on the rest of us, and we don't prepare for it. I mean, we it's inevitable,
Right.
like even in real world. But in our work, the stakes are that much higher. Now, not to put you on the spot, Sheriff, but you're a sheriff, so you're used to getting put on the spot. He will. Do you have any usable content that you could provide for us that maybe our listeners could listen to
absolutely.
draw them over to you?
I've got, there's a bunch of, we've done 22 stories now. And so kind of an interesting side note on these stories, my production from start to finish, from the research to the interviews to the pre-production, post-production, I run, it's taking an hour to an hour and a half per finished minute.
Wow.
So if I have a, like the Robert Lawson.
I need a calculator. Hold on.
Yeah. I know. The Robert Lawson story, I probably had 90 hours into that.
Wow.
Jeez.
Well, I also have another job.
Right.
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 Kind of.
Right.
Time is a little tough. But I want them right. I want to do them right. I want to make sure that there's a production value that keeps your attention. So you learn the whole story.
Right.
And
but it's also an honor for that individual.
Absolutely.
I mean, like, how would you not?
Because they cherish it. And
this isn't a TikTok video. This is like literally, you know what I mean?
Exactly. So this this is a just a sound piece from the Shaun Schneider story. He was killed. This was the 10th anniversary this year in Lake City, Minnesota. Let me play this. Officer Kevin Dather was working as the school resource officer that day. He was in plain clothes and was in the area when the call came out. He was badge 209.
When the call came out, I was literally 3 houses from the location of the call. And by the time I advised that I would assist Shaun in that, and I could see the red lights coming at me, which meant it was Shaun.
On any priority call like this, especially calls with a weapon, neighboring agencies monitoring radio traffic will start heading that way until they hear the officers are okay. Detective Kurt Struy was one of those neighbors on his way from Wabasha County.
I was in Wabasha at the Wabasha County Sheriff's Office, and I heard the call came out with a man with a gun and a.
So Kevin, I'll just sit in here quick. Kevin was Shaun's partner. Kevin was at the shooting when Shaun got killed.
Oh, geez.
The rest of these guys all responded to help.
Yeah. It's very early morning. You're going, all right, she's not in high school. We knew she was dating an older individual. And so we're walking along, and you're cautious, and we're looking around the area, to make sure. Just checking your surroundings, I guess, is more like it, just making sure that somebody didn't come out of the house and stand there or going to set us up or whatever.
When Shaun and Kevin approached the front of the house, Silty, who they could see inside, ran towards the back of the house.
And we're walking, and we approached the house. Shaun knocks, and I can remember he's got a gun. He's going out the back. I go around, the whole thing's fenced in, so I run all the way around the garage, come to a back corner, kind of the opposite corner of where the front door was.
Silty ran to the back of the house, and he came out the back door armed with a handgun.
When he first started coming out, I got on the radio, and I said, I got him coming out the back door with the gun. I got him here. He's got the gun in his hand. 200 or 201, so you guys copy. We got a man inside of the gun, 618 West Line. And to this day, I can see he comes walking out, never looks up. I don't know if he's talking to himself, what the deal is, when he comes out the back door of the porch. I let him get away from the house. I could see the gun. He doesn't look up, and I, of course, drew down on him, and I said, please drop the gun. And he barely glanced at me, looks back down, turns around, walks right back in the house, doesn't raise his gun.
So that kind of gives you a little bit of a...
Right.
Just a... Hold on, let me turn this off. It just kind of gives you kind of an idea of what... That was Kevin Dather. The guy, he's such a good guy. He's your old school cop that was the tough guy. Stuff doesn't bother me. This is just another call, and it ended up, the cumulative PTSD ended up taking him away from this career. And he talks about that. It's super powerful. He talks about that in the story.
Wow.
So what I'll do is, that one was a tough one for me because I was in my office with another investigator, and we were listening on our task force radios, and we were listening to this happen.
Oh, really? Wow.
And we knew several of the people there. It was about an hour away from us, and it was in December. It's around Christmas time, and boy, it was a tough time for everybody here.
Yeah. Wow.
But it just goes to show when as we go through these stories with the different officers, with the officer down, with their families, we show that they're just real people, and just amazing. They're true heroes in our community.
Right.
Well, you can tell that Sheriff, you're definitely still moved by it, even though you're doing this stuff every single day. It's not turned into a grind for you, because it's obviously still touching you emotionally. I mean, which just shows how powerful that stuff is to not just cops, but people that understand cops, know cops, live with cops, want to learn more about whatever. So again, we can't thank you enough for coming on and talking about this stuff. And we hope that we provide you some opportunity to get some additional listeners, and maybe you can take that thing nationwide. It's easy for me to say that, Sheriff, because that's, like I said, what is it, an hour for every minute you got to do production? Maybe
hour and a half.
Yeah, right.
So the next out-of-state, I do have an out-of-state story coming up, another survivor story from Arizona, Department of Public Safety, a state trooper there.
Yeah. Wow.
It's going to be a cool story too. A lot of cool stuff coming up.
So
appreciate it, man.
Appreciate it. Where could everybody get your podcast, webpage, Insta, Facebook, whatever you got?
Yep. So if you're new to podcasting like I am, I never listened to a podcast before this, believe it or not. Everything I listen to is music. So my kids thought I was crazy. The website is officerdownmemorialpodcast.com. That's the website. So you can go there and you can download them there if you don't have a favorite app that you use to get podcasts. Otherwise, it's on every major podcast platform out there. You just search Officer Down Memorial Podcast. You'll find them on the website. There's a lot of pictures and a lot more data about the cases.
Nice.
So it's pretty cool to share that. But you can find it anywhere, and we just encourage people to look it up, listen to it. Certainly, if you're on Apple, make sure you give us a rating and a shout out, and we just try to get in front of as many people as we can.
Chris has got that tattooed on his abdomen. That whole thing, they had to leave us a rating and a review. Like he's at the end of every show.
It's actually a tramp
I had to end on a funny. I'm sorry.
And on the back it's a reverse, just in case I'm walking away and you're going to hear him here. It says
roll him over so we can read the outro.
It's actually a tattoo of a Post-it note with the instructions on the Post-it note.
Stop recording. Hit recording.
Look at you with the corners there, man. That coloring hurt.
I should have gone with yellow.
Well, thank you again, Sheriff. I appreciate it so much.
Thank you. Nice to meet you.
For our
Thanks for everything you do.
Guys. Thank you.
Please go give the Sheriff podcast a listen. It's truly powerful. And for our little venue, wherever you listen to your podcast, please download it. Leave a rating or review. It's 3 Cops Talk. Number 3 Cops Talk. And if you guys have questions or concerns, suggestions for shows, please email 3copstalk@gmail.com. That's the number 3copstalk@gmail.com. And then the website's the same, 3copstalk.com. Thank you so much, Sheriff. Please be safe. Keep the faith.
Take care.
A great mission. Thank you, guys.
Hey, everyone, we've got some powerful fallen hero stories in the works from Minnesota, Ohio, Arizona, and more. So make sure you subscribe to the podcast. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. If you're an Apple listener, we'd love to get a review. And if you're a Blue Survivor family and would like us to share your fallen hero story, we'd love to hear from you too. You can reach out to us on the website at www.officerdownmemorialpodcast.com. Finally, we're always interested in your feedback and suggestions on how we can make this show even better. Until next time, I'm Sheriff Scott Rose. Thanks for listening.